That was Tiokasin Ghosthorse on the red cedar Lakota flute in a live version of his composition Momentum from his album Akantu Origin Series. And that is the closest I will ever come to being a jazz DJ. So welcome to Union Theological Seminary. And welcome to the Dharma and Justice Dialogues. Tonight we are going to be talking about just relationship with the earth. This event is organized by the Thich Nhat Hanh Program for Engaged Buddhism at Union, which means it was organized by Peace Twesaji. So thank you, Peace, for everything you do to keep all of this going. I'm Kosen Greg Snyder, the Senior Director of Buddhist Studies here at Union. But more importantly, I want to welcome our guests who have generously given their time to offer their experiences and their teachings around this moment in the life of the human species and our relationship with Mother Earth. So to save some time, we're going to put their longer bios in the chat so you can refer to them. But I'll just say a little bit about them. Tiokasin Ghosthorse is the host of First Voices Radio, which explores the cultures of indigenous peoples and the threats they face. He's a member of the Cheyenne River Lakota Nation of South Dakota and has long been involved in indigenous rights and advocacy. And as you heard, he's a brilliant musician. If you don't know his music, it's gorgeous. He and I know each other from traveling around the world with spiritual communities, and he's a good friend. So I'm very, very happy that he's here and he's joining us. Sensei Kritee Kanko is a climate scientist, an educator activist, grief ritual leader, and a Zen priest. She is a Zen teacher in the Rinzai Zen lineage of Cold Mountain, a founding Dharma teacher of Boundless in Motion, and a co-founder of Rocky Mountain Eco Dharma Retreat Center. I'm so happy she's here. We have a shared heart when it comes to Dharma practice and the importance of an earth-centered life in that. So I'm thrilled that she's here with us. And Cláudio Carvalhaes, professor at Union Theological Seminary, a theologian, a liturgist, and an artist, a native Brazilian, completed his PhD in liturgy and theology at Union here in New York City. And in my opinion, he's a performance artist disguised as a religious ritualist, but he's a dear, dear friend and a lover of people in the earth. And I'm very happy he's here too. These three people before you are folks who get involved. The bios are important, but the reason that I felt it's so important for them to come together is each are educators, advocates, and defenders of Mother Earth, and each have something to teach us about this moment where the survival of our species and so many other species, so many dear friends across the plant and animal world, their lives are hanging in the balance based on our decisions as a species right now. And I invite them all on, and I hope that I look forward to the conversation we're about to have. So welcome, Tiokasin, Kritee, and Cláudio. Thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I want to start with a big, wide open question for all of you to respond to. And that is the climate crisis, is what we're calling the climate crisis, is it a spiritual crisis? And if it is, in what way? How is it a spiritual crisis? Leave that open to you.
So I think we agreed that I would be number one here. So I'll go with it, and thank you for the invite, and to you, Greg, and to Kritee and Cláudio. I expect some eye-opening, heart-wielding answers, I suppose, from you too. Thank you, and welcome everybody to Turtle Island. Welcome to what you call America. Welcome to the land from the elders that were here before any humans were. Anywhere on earth. And I think about them when we talk about climate crisis, and it's kind of like a very soft term for climate crisis, what they're going through. I think it comes out of our concepts of humanity that we when we're able to get over ourselves as humans, then the concept of humanity won't exist anymore, and that we'll be going to those beings that were originally here that showed us how to live here, like the wind here that I have with me. All of these elements of consciousness are alive and still care for us are here. So when I think about climate crisis, well, when's it started, when I first heard this was when I was a little boy, when I was in the 60s, when I was a child, and the old people were talking about what their elders were talking about, who were born in the 1800s and down the road, immemorial generations. And they were talking about how the change has come. Even then, the subtleties of it. Now we are here in the hand of the earth, and she's telling us this bigger message than humanity can ever really hear, especially about how we've been taught to be benevolent and how we hear. That we know the answer, that we're going to put it and we're going to save the earth and be able to put it into maybe some measurement and throw money at it, and all of these concepts of humanity. But those others who have balanced and lived with her, with the earth for so long, and who are those who are listening to that have really listened, have really seen how the earth listens to us, and how we need to take clues about how she listens to us. She taught indigenous peoples how to listen to her. Right? But we in the humanity anthropocentric world say we are going to the earth or going to nature to listen. But that application of how we listening is not true to how the original instructions were and are. And so I would go to understand this climate crisis now as a crash. And it seems like everybody is getting into this urgency of saving something, saving something so that we survive what we've done to the earth as humans. But yet in the naturalist and the rhythm of what's going on with the earth, I live in a right-angled building. Everybody talks about the elephant in the room, and I'm talking about how did the elephant get there? And even more so, who built the room? Who built the room? And so no one wants to talk about the elephant, but yet we still have to go through the layers of how did the elephant get here? Well, it was through our humanity, to put animals in zoos, to put other human beings in zoos, to put Earth in a zoo. You see, because we seem to be benevolent and we have the answers because our thoughts are more, complex than a tree. But yet the tree is the one that gives us the air to breathe. So, the intelligences. So when we're able to listen to the earth in that manner, primal manner, not primitive, then we begin to feel that rhythm, and she teaches us that maybe it's not a crisis after all, that it may be us. Maybe it's because we've been seeing things out of boxes. Maybe we've had our own ideas of what spirituality or religion is. And then you go to indigenous peoples who don't even have the word for spirituality or religion, because you can't capture that in a book or a box or even in a word. So I say these things because that's what I'm feeling. And to put Earth in an academic, I would say, way to explain our rationalities of what we must do, it seems like we're being done to by the Earth already. She's very patient with us. She's been patient with humans. As far as Native people are concerned, indigenous peoples here, I think it's because of the roots that keep us in place to understand that we too, our languages are needed because these are languages of the earth. And so my job, I guess, would be to try to convey this message that now the earth is the biggest message, not humanity, but earth is the biggest message. But when we put humans before that, I think it's the lost cause. So climate crisis, I think it's needs to have a different feeling to it. rather than one of urgency and it's over. Changing the language is what I'm intending. So I'd like to open up with that, and very interested in what my colleagues would say.
How do you pick up after that? Thank you so much, Tiokasin. I want to change the question because I agree, how do we put spirituality into a box? I want to change what you asked, Greg. First of all, I want to make it ecological crisis instead of just climate crisis. Climate crisis is just the tip of the iceberg, right? What we have done to our rivers and our oceans is no less dire. And then I want to shift the second part of your question. Instead of talking about spiritual crisis because it boxes spirituality and faith and religion up, I want to address specifically, is this a crisis for Buddhist Sanghas? And I would say absolutely yes. The way I have seen Buddhism operating in the West, right? Buddhism, a tradition semi-indigenous to Asia, to India, right, to my people. The way it has landed in this culture, how much of it has been taken out of context, and now, given this wide ecological crisis and the associated social crisis of how we are refusing to see other human beings from different backgrounds, races, castes, cultures, and how we are tormenting our animal friends, right? Absolutely a spiritual crisis for Buddhist Sanghas. We are not listening, as Tiokasin was referring to cries of the earth. I did not realize, Greg, that this series is sponsored by Thich Nhat Hanh tradition somehow. One of the most beautiful things I remember in this work I do, once someone asked Thich Nhat Hanh, what is the most important thing I can do to tackle climate crisis? I probably don't remember the words right, but his response was, not any strategy, not any specific tactic. He said, can you get everyone to listen to the cries of Mother Earth? And I think we are failing in that. This is a crisis for Buddhist Sanghas because for all of our teachings on interdependence, right, interbeing, interconnection, that overlap with indigenous teachings from ancestors all over the world, we have failed to actualize it. We have failed to act on it, to take care of our community in deep enough ways that they can get out of their traumatic fight, flight, and freeze and take actions with clarity, bold actions, stand up for Mother Earth. Who in their right mind would be okay seeing their mother raped and not say anything? And here we are, Buddhists included, this wild pain, and we are not seeing it. So yes, crisis. Passing it to Claudio.
What a joy to be here with you all. As I said before, I feel this enormous gift to me, and I'm feeling that here I am on the baby steps in that awareness of our relationship with the earth, and we'll talk more about it. But sticking to my sensei questions about, is this a spiritual crisis? I was reminded of because I am a Christian and coming from the or Greek European thinking that shaped many forms of Christianity here. So I'm reminded of the crisis could be put into one story from Heidegger, when Heidegger said, well, he looks at the Rhino, the river in the Black Forest, and he says, the people who came before me saw mermaids in this river. And what I look now is an hydroelectric power dam. And I think that it puts in a situation why we have this crisis. Because the people who could see a mermaid in the river, they could see a fullness of relationalities, of beings, of spirits, of the river. It was an ecology of liveness, of earthlings, all connected together. And what modernity did to us and enlightenment did to us was to sever all of that, and all we see it is a dam, which it is not to see the river anymore. It is just to see what comes out of what we need. So I think that says a little bit of why we are in this crisis, because we have lost the ways to see, to feel, to perceive, to engage. Our worlds were shrinked. So coming from this Christian tradition, which comes also from the Jewish tradition, I am reminded of, if we talk about this spiritual crisis in this climate disasters that we are already living, if we go to Genesis, when God breathes, and this breath goes to everywhere. So the breath is life, but then the life, as I learned with my brother Ted Hebert, he says, so this breath is the air, is the atmosphere, so everything is alive. But Christians have lost the sense of this liveliness, and then we shrink this breath only to humans, and we made a hierarchy, and we put some people on top, so humans became the la crème de la crème, and everything else was subsumed. And if Christians would at least pay attention that the Spirit came with Jesus, what was the incarnation of the Spirit when Jesus was baptized? Was a bird. So God was unfeathered. And so if I am to be a Christian, I have to be that my God is a bird. I follow an avian God. But because we have lost that sense, all what is left is this weird sense of like a moist, of a spirit, or something without substance that I'm following, that is here, sometimes is there, sometimes is there. I don't know exactly where. I know where it cannot be, and the natural world that it cannot be. There's just partial there. But when I get to that, it means that I lost how to breathe. And I think it is a spiritual crisis because we cannot breathe. Because if spirituality has to do with our breathing, what is COVID-19 is, if not the impossibility to breathe. What our Black brothers and sisters are screaming, I cannot breathe. Oh, I come from Brazil, where this government, this state, is taking away all of the life of my precious indigenous people. They cannot breathe. And so it is a dramatic, worldly, spiritual crisis because we are running out of breath. If I cannot consider the coral reefs as the ones, the beings who make the whole ocean to breathe, as important as my avian bird to help me breathe. If I cannot see that, it's because I am living in a deep spiritual crisis. And then we start to put names. So it's liberals will say that it's a moral crisis, which is also too. But and then other Christians will say no, it is a moral in terms of costumes, or in terms of sexuality or abortion, but it all shrinks what is much larger to pinpoint into some issues here and there. So I believe we are living in an enormous spiritual crisis.
Thank you all. We could stop there. We have this title, Being in Just Relationship with Mother Earth. And one of the reasons just relationship, why that language, is because we talk a lot about justice. But justice is this thing that becomes an abstraction. It's out there somewhere. What is justice? How do we understand what that is? And we oftentimes don't consider whether I am in just relationship with what is in my immediate intimate world, other beings, other humans, other beings, other species, Mother Earth herself, what it is to be in just relationship. So that's a question. I'm going to put together two questions because they're related. One is, what is it to be in just relationship with Mother Earth? And what do we need to address in ourselves spiritually to arrive at that? And then the other thing I'm going to put into that is, does it matter in this just relationship with Mother Earth? Does it matter how we address the earth? In other words, I tend to follow the leadership of the native elders of Turtle Island, where I live, and I say Mother Earth. That's my way of, that's what I've learned from elders, and that feels appropriate to me. And I feel that sentience, and I feel that learning from her. But there are plenty of people who are involved in addressing these issues that have a rational scientific relationship with an ecosystem out of balance. And the question in terms of just relationship with the earth is, what is this addressing the sentience of Mother Earth? Is this a necessary part of this just relationship? So I'll leave it there, and whoever wants to speak.
Being someone who wears both of those hats, a scientist and someone who teaches, and I'll start. It is true, Greg, that when I refer to Earth in my scientific academic circles, I purposely do not use the word Mother Earth most of the time. Sometimes I bring it in consciously because you want to appear like a rational scientist, but it hurts me to do that. Because in my spiritual life, in my practicing life, I read with that pain. I read with her pain, right? And that you can call it climate grief, or you can call it climate trauma. For me, sometimes it's intense like trauma. It's like feeling pain of Mother Earth and all beings. So I would wholeheartedly refer to her as a being. You call it Gaia or anything else. More and more so in the last year, in my heart, that's what I believe. And now, how do I come in right just relationship with Gaia, with Mother Earth? One of the fundamental things I want people to go away with is, if we cannot sit with our own pain, personal, individual pain, although you can argue there is no such thing as personal, individual pain. What I mean by personal, individual pain is our personal traumas, the abuse, the sexual abuse, the verbal abuse, alcoholism in the family, trauma and rape in the family, all of that. If we cannot sit with our own grief, how can we possibly sit with someone else's grief? To be in just relationship with minorities, if you are, let's say you are a white cisgender man and you want to be in right relationship with other beings, other species, and Mother Earth, the first step is not going and trying to do something for anyone else. Hello, please, let's sit with our own pain. If we cannot sit with our own pain, I believe we end up doing perfunctory stuff for others. When we learn to sit with our own pain, then you can sit with pain of other human beings, other species, domesticated animals, and you can sit with pain of mother, who's soaking in pain of all her children too. I hope that made some sense. I'm going to stop and pass it to Claudio, maybe.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think there are wisdom and limitations in all of these words. And I think we can expand it the way that you just did, Kritee. That was so beautiful. Thank you. I think the just relationship, it starts from it, so it implies that it's being unjust, right? And so it's and what we do with it. I think one of the things we have to do is to become aware of who were here before us. And like I live now here in Pennsylvania. Part of my life is here, and all the Lenape people also, and the other indigenous people were all kicked out. They were kicked out and killed, and if I do not remember them, the ones who are producing this injustice have won. And so I have to remember them and call their names and learn about them. So that's why for Christians, when they do the Eucharist, there's one thing there called that's what something that we remember. the name of something that we remember. Anamnesis. And to remember. And I think what I say is that all we have to remember when we are there is to remember those who have gone without a name, that we desecrated. And so we start there, because there it makes me understand that what I have now, it is already unjust, that I am living right now in this private land who was a stolen land, and I'm here. So with this awareness, it reminds me of it makes me look at history, and then it makes me look at colonialism and coloniality. And what was coloniality if not one major thing? To uproot people, take people away from their roots, from their land. And when you have your whole life organized with the landscape of that region, of this patch of land, if you uproot them, you take away everything. You take away the spirits, you take away the knowledge, you take away the relationality, and then we all start spinning. And I think this is what is happening now. We are always spinning. When we go by a house, we talk about neighborhood, or if there is a hospital, or if there's like a supermarket, but we never think about who were there before, and we don't think about who is in this land, who are the living beings here that I'm going to live with. We don't pay attention to that because we are so uprooted. It doesn't matter if I live here or 100 miles away from here. It doesn't matter. All that matters is how many rooms my house has. And in that way, it is just keep on going. Because what we have learned, and when I cited Heidegger, is because he couldn't see anything else besides them, and we cannot see anything else besides our desires. We desire that desires. And because of that, because we're not rooted anywhere, we need to be in what Davi Kopenhauer, this indigenous man from the Yanomamis in the Amazon, he says, the white people are, and here white is everybody who's not indigenous, are the people of the merchandise. Your rootedness are in the merchandise. And what means is that you're so uprooted from the land that you can only dream about yourselves. You can only dream about humans. And why? Because Descartes taught us that we have a discrete being that is detached from everything. And that's what real knowledge is. So I am only what I am by myself. My soul is myself, my body. And if we look in the spiritual way, or we look in a scientific way, there are more beings in us, and there are more non-human beings in us. We are made by non-humans. And that's what makes it so, unless we start to see. And I think we have to do, and my brother Tiokasin can tell us this, is that I'm learning too, and I learned this from C.F. Black from New Zealand, when he says we have to follow the law of the land. That's the first and most important law. That's what I'm teaching my students. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, whatever. The first law is not the law of your religion. The first law is the law of the land. Upon that land, everything comes up. But without the law of the land, nothing can exist. And we only start to do that by paying attention. That's what I'm trying to do now. Paying attention. You know, like a 3-4-year-old kid who walks on the street and stops at every little leaf. Or my mother who's 90 who walks slowly and stop at every single flower. And we have to stop with her. And then she's going to talk about that flower for 5 minutes. And if there's 10 flowers, it's going to take as much time. And if there's 100 flowers, it's going to take the whole day, because she pays attention. So I need to pay attention. I'll stop here.
Wow, I want to have the same diet Claudio has. I want that diet. I mean, whoa, you know, it's thundering here. It's thundering, and I like that. It's kind of affirming what we're saying here and feeling. So I'd rather feel than think what I'm going to say to you all is, I think it's easier for me to feel and then kind of put it into concepts. So in our language, we have no nouns. So if we speak about the earth in nouns and name it tree, earth, and all these, you know, subjective, objectifying, stagnant things, right? We thinkify everything, then the spirit leaves. But if we use the language of verbs, movement, motion, energy, and you ascribe that, then your language is that. And, you know, that's what food is, that's what air is, that's what everything is. But right angles takes us away from that natural movement, because you don't find right angles in the nature. And I go back to the justice question about when one of my elders, from ancient elders, I could say, who went out to the future, by the way. Our elders go out into the future, and so we follow them. So who is the elder here? It's Native people. It's the land, so we follow the land. We follow the other Native people, elders who go out. My mother will go out. My father has gone. My grandfather. I follow them. They go into the future. So one of those ancestors said, the center of the universe is everywhere. It's not just one place. And when we think about that, another elder I interviewed yesterday for the radio said, do we want to live on a dead planet? So why are we holding people who make all the money and allow them to race rockets into the sky? And now everybody's directing that we're going to bring Mars alive, a dead planet. And so now here we are, you know, faced with this description of what justice is doing. And not doing. And I think that there are technical human doings, and then there are organic human beings. And there is a difference between that. There is the 1493 papal bull, for those of you who know the doctrine of discovery. And in that, the Pope says something about scientio dominate. Native peoples don't have the concept or the word for domination. So our language is one in relationship to all beings, sentient or not. They're all beings, they're all alive. They put air, they give us sustenance, they're alive, they have energy. So we go beyond that scope of sentientism, that's a word, and understand that even though we don't see it, it is there. And when I think about the human doings who don't even stop to listen to you, to your grandmother, Claudio, or to the elders that I've talked to, is the justice has come into a place of human rights, civil rights, because the justice system that's been given and fed to the peoples in democracy and republics are all saying, well, you have to go through our courts to receive justice. And usually those courts have decisions that are made through the bank. Now, Native peoples are making our decisions, and I still refer to my elders on a reservation and other places that we are still making decisions through the earth, because we want to be in rhythm with the earth when the justice that she is serving right now is an earth justice. And are we in the consciousness of her earth justice rather than our, well, we better get while we can, when an elder of mine also said, if you can't take it with you, why take it now? So, this whole idea that we are waiting for sky gods to come and save us in this hope and despair, concept, it's very different. It's people are looking up and I'm looking at the earth and being uploaded by the earth. The earth is telling us the consciousness, all that activity that's going on in the earth, the movements. My body's feeling the same way. But when I come to America, because we were here before America, when I come to America, I see the disconnect you talk about, Claudio and Kritee, is that there is an unfinished grief that Americans don't want to see about their uprootedness, about what has happened here to the land and to us as indigenous peoples. And it's a short question. It's a short conversation when it comes to indigenous peoples, because that will lead to what are they doing to the land? So as if the earth were dead. Do we want to live on a dead planet? Or do we want to support those languages that bring in abundance the life that I can say easily? If I say, I have a garden, and I grow the garden. I grew the garden. That's totally my Western head talking. My heart says, the garden grows me. The garden is growing me. And you're recognizing all the beings and intelligences and the consciousnesses that are going into you. So to live that life as if your body was in the soul, rather than the soul only in this container. Because, it fits. Our languages don't fit in the one I'm speaking to you, because they're so quantum physics, they reach beyond this dimension, 2-3 dimension, and we're talking and we're bringing. And an elder also of mine said, I haven't seen a Catholic priest bring rain yet, but you go out to the reservation and you go out to Hopi, and those elders sitting there like, okay, maybe we need some rain again. And they'll say something or say a little prayer. 10 minutes later, here comes some rains. It rains and it goes away. So this thunder that I had out here was like, what can I say? Shall I speak from my head or shall I speak from my heart? So we speak from the heart. It's the earth languages that we all have, rather than theory. In the old Lakota, we cannot speak Lakota without intuition. Therefore, we cannot speak in theory. Our languages have no theory, but we have what you would say imagination. Is when we close our eyes, we can feel life, and that's intuition. And it's just not a theory of intuition, it actually works. You call it ESPA or telepathic, but you see that happening to the old people like my grandmothers and grandfathers who talked to each other without saying words, who were born in the 1800s. So it's the closest language to the earth is a relational language, not the rational language to constantly give existence to why we are here. Here's what we do. Well, we'll say that's climate crisis. And here's what we're going to measure, carbon emissions. And, we'll switch from fuel to lithium, and we'll just continue it, but we'll keep illusion of people. So dominate scientia, to dominate the people through science, because that's all they have now. That's the desperation. So I'll stop right there.
Thank you again, all of you. I want to ask a few questions that are directed at you all specifically. And part of it has to do, these questions have to do with what brought you to this, and how you're relating to it. But with you, Tiokasin, this has been a while. So didn't start yesterday. And so the question I want to ask you is, and people may not know this, that Tiokasin as a teenager addressed the United Nations in Geneva. And the question I have for you is, what moved you as a teenage boy to travel over to Switzerland and address the United Nations? What did you address them about, and what moved you to do it?
Thank you for that, Greg. I get sad, I get happy when I hear this, because I remember it as if it was walking out the door. And all of the things that you hear now, the young people speaking in the Lakota, every generation is the seventh generation. You see, not just we're waiting for it. This is what we do. And so, we pay attention to Greta, which I'm glad her voice is out there. But the same things, and you can go back and find young people, indigenous people, saying the very same things other young people are saying now. So who are we listening to? Is it the children, because they're closest coming from the light, that we as adults are so far away that we think we have the concept and the answer to solve the problem we caused with the same language that put us to sleep in the first place? So maybe it is a different language we are listening to or hearing. That's intuitive languages. And so when I was this young man, I'm wondering, and you can see it now, the sun, you could spend all day outside and the sun was yellow. And it was so soothing, and just like it talked to you and spoke to you. But then when you're looking at the animals and going hunting and fishing and spending all day outside with your toys, and I'm not talking human toys, I'm talking about the horses and the deer and the birds and all of the thousands of different species of insects and everything out there, that's your toys. You don't need distraction. So you're in concert with them, and you're hearing the music, and somewhere along the line, there's a glitch. And this glitch for me was education. And it came at me like a knife, and it kept hitting me in my heart, and it felt wrong. It felt like it didn't want me to say the things about the earth that it wanted me to do, which education was, coming from boarding schools, coming from these times of the system says this is how you must do it in order to get ahead and feel good about yourself. But I felt worse as I got away from the earth. And so education, I began to think it's educating the wisdom out of me. And I didn't want that hurt. So the only way I could understand it, okay, I'll learn this language, which is a foreign language to me, and I'll go to places if you want me to. Creation. And that's where it led me to. It led me to travel with other spiritual groups when I was young. I would say that, but these were groups of other young people. And we were talking about our cultures and how close we are with the earth. And every subsequent generation has gotten a little further away from the earth. And now we're facing the right directions because we have guidance in that, hearing that from 15 to when I was very young, and knowing that there is a different way to think. There's a different way to live with the earth. There's a different way to have peace with the earth rather than the one that we've been taught from the West, is to dominate and live and try to find peace on the earth, which we've been practicing for thousands of years and has gotten us nowhere. So it's simply living with the earth was the message that back then, when I was 15 years old, talking to all white people. And it was very quick to me. And that's what I remember. It's different. It's going to be different. And please listen to us, because we're still speaking the languages of the earth. And that time, and I felt responsible from then on. And so I've been bringing her message since then. So I don't know if that answers your question, Greg, but it came pretty close, I think. Yeah.
It does, and thank you, Tiokasin, not just for the response, but for all that your life has brought you to do in this way. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kanko, I'm so you're a Zen Buddhist priest, and you're a climate activist, and you're involved in this. And the question is, how do those things come together? How do your Zen vows? How does your Zen practice? And this work, how does that come up for you? How do you understand that?
Do you have 1 hour? I will answer your question. I want to tie it to the issue of grief, because it came up earlier in the session. I grew up in a family of a Gandhian freedom fighter and lawyer in India. But when I was trying to become like my grandfather, right, I actually became bitter and arrogant, because for me, learning to act in ways that bring the just relationship with people around me back, I hadn't dealt with my own grief and trauma. It was way too much for me to try to learn about grief of others and how I can take meaningful actions. I felt crippled by the knowledge of injustice that has gone on and is still going on. What meditation helped me do when I landed in America, my first 6 months, I was utterly depressed. I came here to do my PhD, but I couldn't function. There were other reasons, but one big reason was this existential pain of not being able to live my values, right? Meditation, first 10 years of meditation practice was just slowing down enough, as Claudio was saying, slow down, notice, just noticing my own breath and noticing what pain I have been carrying. At the end of it, when my teacher gave me permission to teach independently and I became a priest and thought of setting my own Sangha, I had processed a lot of my own pain. I was ready to hear again the cries of the earth, so to speak, right? Mother Earth. But what was still missing, what I am still grappling with, how do we organize our communities to come together to take collective action? See, one of the things which Zen still doesn't help me with, it doesn't have, or at least I am not aware of it, how do we create systems of care? So we always say we have systems of oppression, Tiokasin was saying systems of domination, men, heterosexual, cisgendered people, on and on, white people. Systems of oppression will not get taken care of by just one enlightened being, right? I'm talking about Buddhism here. what I grew up with in my root Sangha was this notion, just sit deep enough and other problems will take care of themselves. Your job is just to get enlightened. And that is deeply dissatisfying. It was dissatisfying at the time. And even now, I feel our cutting edge as people who consider themselves to be engaged Buddhists is to create systems of care, systems that are rooted in care. One individual cannot change a system. For changing a system, you need another system, right? And I think that's where my focus is these days. How do you organize a movement that is rooted in uh, all these, for the lack of a better word, values and frameworks we are talking about, where you can see a mermaid in the river, where you can take the time to smell a flower, smell each other, be with each other's grief, and take strategic actions together, not just cathartic actions. Oh my God, I'm so pained, fossil fuel companies are here. No, 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 no. Uh, Crying is important, catharsis has its place, and when it comes to stopping a pipeline, I want you sitting with me in front of a bulldozer, right? Or if I am an immigrant and I cannot sit in front of a bulldozer, whoever can, come do it. And I'm so proud of my friends and Sangha members who've been doing it. The Stop Line 3 movement that's going on in Minnesota. There are people from Greg's Sangha and my Sangha who've, who've gone beyond their comfort zone and said, no, for the river, for the wild rice, for future generations, for our ancestors, here, we're going to show up with our bodies. That's the kind of collective, courageous action I want to see coming from Buddhist communities. And the first step to that, I would still argue, is sitting with our own grief, because being told what we have to do gives us guilt and shame. No, 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 no. That's not what we need more of. I'm not talking about guilting you into doing anything, shaming you into anything, and increasing our trauma loads. I'm talking about what will bring us to radical action with joy and care for each other. Okay? So I covered more than what you asked for, but I would really wanted to say that.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Claudia, I'm going to give you an impossible task. My good friend, you have only a few minutes because we want to go to questions. But I want to ask you this question. I want to ask the question of what changed, because you come from the Christian tradition and you've alluded to some of this, but what changed about your spirituality when it turned toward the earth?
Ooh, yes. Yeah, that's why I was proposing that we do this every week, because that would be nice. And what my sister gave already is so rich. Oh. The little that I learned about the earth was with my mother, who comes from a erased generation of indigenous people that I cannot even claim. And I would be the last person to be a person concerned with the earth, because I am a city boy. I mean, I grew up in Sao Paulo. You put me in a big city and I thrive. I know how to handle myself. Just put me like anywhere and I will be able to live well. But put me in the middle of a forest and I'll pee my pants. Because I'm so scared. I cannot, even because I'm afraid. And I remember when I was the first pastor in Brazil in the small community, when we would visit people, and it was more next to a beautiful forest, and so we would have to go visit people and we have to go through the trees. And so the fun of the kids was to ask me what kind of tree was the one that we were passing. And I couldn't differentiate a pear from an apple tree. So that's how much I know, right? and so this has been and still is right here. It's changing the deepest parts of myself. So when my brother said that there's a way of thinking and feeling that is different, I'm searching for it. I remember I was in El Salvador once with a group of indigenous people from Central and Latin America, and I was asked to do a performance there, and I did a performance, and this indigenous elder came to me and hold my head and said, "But you need the sacred sound." And I was completely lost. What does that mean? And that kept with me since that day, and is with me every day. I'm trying to, what is that sacred sound that she said? But it took me so long because I was so detached from the earth. I mean, enlightenment did its work. Nature, which was created by the enlightenment, was a way of taking care of that which was scared. That's what I am, scared. So it was 3 years ago when, so I got married 5 years ago, and I adopted 3 kids with my wife, Katie. And then I started to hear all the things about climate change. And I said, what earth am I gonna give to my kids? And I start to read the indigenous people, and they say you have to take care of at least 7 to 8 generations, the ones before you and yours, and then 3. And I said, I don't know what to give to this generation. And it was Robin Kimmerer, the indigenous writer, who was at Union once, and she was giving this talk, and because I do rituals and liturgy and all of that, and she said, you know, our people have ceremonies because this is who we are, right? But what are other rituals that help us to do that? When she did that, it was an altar call. I stood up and said, here I am. I want to do it. Yes. I don't know how or in what ways, but since that day, everything changed. To the point that I had to throw out all of my courses. I couldn't teach them anymore. I'm creating all new courses, but I am trying to find out that feeling that my brother was talking about. That connection, that sacred sound. And that's why I'm going slowly, paying attention and observing the patterns of the land. Feeling how, paying attention to the patch of land where I live, thinking that I'm never alone because there are all these living beings around me, right? There's the worms, there's the mice, there's the squirrel, there's the birds, there's the trees. So and learning that my life can only make sense if they are around me. So as a Christian, I tell my students, we cannot hear the bird, God has no sound. If we cannot see the bird as singing God's song, our own song, we haven't heard that sacred sound yet. So I'm going to stop here, but this is what happened to me.
Thank you, all of you. We're going to go to questions, but I just want to, I'm sitting here and feeling all of you, and the thought that arose from that was such different energies, but each one so full of love. So thank you all for coming from love and bringing that to all of us. And I'm going to turn it over to Peace, who's gonna handle the questions.
Yes, hello everyone. Yes, thank you. Thank you for all of these responses and this energy. I feel the love too, and hear the rain and see the lightning and feel the thunder. So for those of you in the audience, you can feel free to put questions in the Q&A section. And we'd also like to invite those of you who may have questions and would like to come on screen to raise your hand. And then we can bring you up on screen. So if you'd like to do that, you can go to the bottom of your screen and you'll see just a hand, and it says raise hand underneath, and you can press that, and then we'll create a queue and invite you on to ask your questions. But until we see a raised hand, we'll go with written questions. So let me pull those up. Oh, they're quite long. Okay. I'll just go with this first one here and just read it aloud. It says, being alive in these times feels scary and unstable. Turning toward realities about our world and imminent future and present feels overwhelming and creates in me an ongoing sense of doom and anxiety. What is your advice about how to face what is happening and still to be able to live with joy and courage?
Shall I give it first attempt here? I don't see name of the person who asked this question, but this is why I say it's so crucial to do our grief work, so that we can use the energy of our grief and anger and fear to propel us into radical actions. But we all need what I call safe spaces to express our primal rage and grief. And I'm a huge proponent of grief work, rage work. A lot of indigenous traditions, people in Africa, all over the world have had rituals around expressing our grief. And if you are in the United States, you can look up a community of facilitators called the Work That Reconnects facilitators that were trained by Joanna Macy and other teachers. That can be very important. I have seen people transform when we get that raw space to express our frustration, anger, and grief, and then you don't feel alone in the sense of doom. It's real. If any one of you has ever taken care of a plant and that plant dies in your care, I promise you, you've felt sadness. Entire ecosystems are collapsing now and Mother Earth is crying. How would we not feel doom, sense of doom? Yes? So there's nothing wrong with feeling this doom. We need to express it. We need to create communities that can hold our grief. One-to-one psychotherapy is never going to be enough, even if we have all the money to pay to therapists. So let's create capacity in our communities. That's what I mean by sitting with our own grief. We need those capacities in our Buddhist communities, in our Christian communities, all communities. Capacity to sit with each other's grief. Okay? When we express that, I see people transformed and being able to take courageous actions, even with joy. Because when we express grief, our capacity to experience joy also increases. So,
All right, thank you. Thank you. We'll invite.
I was wondering to answer that question.
Oh, feel free. Yes, feel free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
29 years of being on the radio and hearing stories from across the planet, it's incredible. And hearing Native people, hearing one, I think it was maybe 15 years ago, someone described this, that the Native people, Bushmen, were living in a national park. Excuse me, they weren't living in a national park, somewhere in Africa. And the people of the nation wanted to explore for gold and other rare earth minerals, and so they found some where the Bushmen lived. And what happened was, okay, well, we got to move the Bushmen out. So they moved them out and said, you live on this land, you can live over there, right? This beautiful, fruitful land with animals and birds and fish and everything. And because they wanted to find gold and whatnot. And all the animals and all the living generous beings left. The land went dead because it was the intention of what these mindsets were doing to the land. They left. But the thing is, you notice that they moved the Bushmen into a very arid, no life place, nothing. So the Bushmen, being in a different surrounding, were like, okay, the government's going to give us handouts. But they did something very different. They continued to be who they were and are, and began to sing their regenerative songs and speak their regenerative language, which it is. And their appreciation for what little they have. And the next thing you know, the animals start showing up. And then 10 years down the road, the whole place was full of life because they were speaking this language. The other place went dead. So next thing you know, the government discovered gold on where they put the indigenous Bushmen. So they said, well, we can have your land back. We can go back. So the Bushmen went, and same thing. It was all devastated and polluted. And so here the animals left again, and the land was all because of the mining. Well, the land returned. And because of they're remembering their language of the earth has memories. The earth doesn't forget who you are as people. And same here in the United States. The Americans put up 2 million dams. About 5 years ago in the northwest part of Washington, they took down a dam called the Alwa. And it stopped. They took it down, all the salmon came back, all life returned after 60 years of blocking Mother Earth's vein. So it's there if we allow Earth to practice regenerativity in ourselves. We don't have to imagine anything. We have to pay attention to the micro rather than the macro. The micro are the rain I hear outside and the wind, and not the cars that go by. So we have to redirect something, and I'm glad that Claudio said, look, this is how I grew up. Well, all that's based on what's being taken from the land. So what happens when that disappears? You won't be able to have that city to grow up in because Earth is calling you back. And so we must learn this regenerative language. And again, what can we do immediately? I think apologize to the Earth.
I will just say one thing, but those two things already encompassed everything. I would just say one thing that that I learned with the indigenous peoples too, as my brother just said, to pay attention to the land where you're living. That's the land you need to love, and that's the land that you need to care for. And that's a way in. That's how we discover that we're much larger, much bigger than anything. Right? And I think this is one of the gifts of Buddhism is to teach us that there's no outside inside. We are all this one being, right? And one thing that I'm gonna mention only is I have this tree that I go often to sit and pay and pray and stay with. And what other day I was overwhelmed by grief because of all this news that we hear, and it's always so overwhelming. I was actually having a dinner with my Sensei Snyder, and I asked him, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know if my body can hold it. And he told me something so precious and so beautiful. He said, don't see yourself only as this body. See yourself as all your surroundings. You are this tree, you are this ground, you are this sky, you are this water. So you're much larger than this. So if you have a larger self that is much more than your discrete self, then the overwhelming grief is going to spread out too, and it's not going to be so destructive, but it spreads, and then you have a sense to see and metabolize and engage with it in much in bigger sense. So that helped me so much as a technique, as a spiritual technique to deal with our times.
All right, thank you. Thank you all for your responses. I'm going to invite Philip to come on and ask his question. You have a raised hand. So when you're ready, Philip, you can turn on your camera and unmute yourself. Welcome, good to see you.
Thank you, Peace. Nice to see you, and nice to see you all. Thank you so much for such an engaged conversation. I want to just grab my question because I wrote it out. Not sure if I would have the opportunity to ask it. So let me just pull it up real quickly. I apologize. So my question to the panelists, again, thank you for such an engaged conversation. Given that human beings are physiological frugivores or fruit eaters with no biological need to consume animals, and given that other animals are sentient beings with the capacity to flourish or suffer, and moreover, given that the exploitation of other animals is in aggregate the single largest cause of environmental degradation. Given these facts, and in the absence of a survival scenario, can the exploitation of other animals be justified morally? And noting here that indigenous use of animals, however it may be framed as being conscious or respectful, and I respect that, or the like, in fact, derives from survival scenario. And again, heartfelt thanks for sharing this wonderful discussion with us.
I didn't know if that was a question, Philip.
There was in fact a question. Can the exploitation, given these facts, can the exploitation of other animals be justified morally?
Morally, well, I think I would take that one as, before electricity and running water on the reservations, we had sustenance living. We lived with the earth in a such that, what you grew, what was growing around you, also allowed you to live there. And I could see Grandma and Grandpa, my mother and father, when I was very young, and other nations, other peoples of native descent, is that, we didn't romanticize the earth. We didn't romanticize ourselves because we had to deal with reality. We didn't have hope because we had to deal with reality. We did something, not wish for something. So when we actually would go, and I remember them asking ceremony, and preparing the arrow or preparing the gun in this case, or the fish hook, that every time there was an action of grief. And it's like I said, they are talking to the animal. In several stories I could tell, but one story was when we were having our Sundance, when I was much older, one of the elders said, okay, the herd is coming, the buffalo herd is coming, which it did. And he said that there will be one young buffalo bull, 7-year-old, that comes out from the middle. And then you'll go back off by himself, and you'll stand out at the hill, and he'll be sad, and then he'll raise his head. And that's when you know he's ready. So that buffalo knew that their sacrifice to support life was an exchange. So we support life, they support life, and it's always not too much of a taking. That's why we developed the word washichu, which means takes too much. You see, and I think that's the whole idea of saying that if we lost the ceremonies with the communication with the animals, that we put things, we understand that we're exploiting the animals. There's no such thing in the native language. How can you exploit yourself? you see. So I think it's holding all life on the same level as you are, rather than you being above it, having the dominant right to do something or even come up with a concept, because they have a behavior of living. And you know, I want to put this in here. Someone asked, said, Tiokasin, don't you think they're romanticizing Native people too much? And I says, we don't even have the word. And I said, what's the alternative? That we continue to idolize and romanticize the Western way? I don't think I will do that. So to me, it's about understanding our mistakes that we have done as human beings and not repeating them. And that's generosity. If we show generosity to the animals, they show it with us. But I think the one-way street of just taking, it's antiquated. And we won't be able to do that anymore. So I think just because we grew up poor according to the West doesn't mean that we were poor when we were living with the earth. The more you're able to live with the earth, the more rich you feel. The more you're able to defend it on a split second. You know, so in that way, I'm thinking that what is that engagement? What is that feeling about what we must do now? And I've heard this overseas someplace, and this diplomat said, we're done doing our best because we've done our best. Look where it's got us. We must do what's required now with the earth. And so that means, to me, changing the language and watching the language that we are using. Are we using domination languages? Yeah, not relational languages. That's what I want, is relational language. But that's the question. That's the answer you get out of me, Philip.
Well, I'll follow up. I'm probably gonna put up, give you a little numbers, some numbers. Only 4% of mammals biomass on the planet right now comes from wild animals. We have domesticated so much, right? So much that it has hurt our own health, right? The food we eat. We put in prisons literally billions of animals every year and systematically brutalize and kill them as a source of protein. And so in my eyes, and I feel that overall we do not have the kind of capability to hear the sounds of animals the way Tiokasin was talking about, right? I have to be in a deep meditation, and then I can begin to intuit into human lives. What are humans actually feeling? I have to be in relationship with plant medicine, or to begin to hear how plants are feeling. I haven't yet gotten to hear what animals are saying, but what I can see is the way industrial agriculture works, this enormous domestication of and brutalization of animals from a climate perspective, ecological perspective, how much water it uses and how it impacts our health. We have to give this a good look, friends. Good look. It's that relationship doesn't feel just to me. Yeah, could say way more, but I can see the time is coming to an end. Maybe Greg or Claudio want to add to this.
I think we heard what we needed to hear with that one.
Greg, did you want to add more before?
Do we have time for one more brief question, or do we need to close?
I think we have time for one more, perhaps.
Please.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you for your question. Just a moment, sorry. Juggling a lot. So Andrew, we'll invite you on to ask a brief question.
Now I'm here. Okay. For the last 2 years, I've been grieving the loss of my fiance and living on a 50-foot wide piece of property next to a lake. And to summarize all of that, my sense is that as I wake up in the morning, kind of half awake, I am increasingly more aware of being open for surprises. For me, that's the Holy Spirit working, trying to figure out whether that's the Holy Spirit or some still small voice which is leading me in the wrong direction. But I'm getting better at that. The bottom line for me is how do I become a more authentic person with the child within and my daughter, my community. For me, sharing stories in a way that, and I think that's what we've been doing today is touching on our own personal stories. I came from a retreat in August of 2019, focused on the moral concerns about climate change and climate crisis. So I thought I'd decrease the amount of hot water I used in my house. That meant using less oil to heat it. And I have spent the last 2 years pushing the handle the wrong way, cursing at myself, being angry, and I'm finally getting to the point where I'm just plain laughing and taking that less serious. I spent the last 2 days since my birthday talking to people more in terms of listening to where they're coming from. My sense is that that's probably where the greatest power is in our ability to truly listen and to demonstrate that, what I call active listening. How would you add to that, please?
Tiokasin, you want to go? I think your questions come with the answers. That's the wise part of it, my brother. You have it, and I would say create stories with the earth. Create new stories with the earth. Like I'll tell you one story with my kids. When I start to listen to the birds, and then I am this wonderful time of listening to the birds. So I take my kids and then I stop them on the street and say, stop, listen. They say, listen to what? What is it that? What is it? I said, the birds. And so my teenager daughter just like roll their eyes and so again. But so I keep playing with them until one day I'm taking Ike, my younger son, to the bus stop, and then all of a sudden I had totally forgotten, and he comes to me and said, "Dad, stop!" I said, "Stop for what?" I said, "What?" I said, "Oh, what is it?" It's the birds. And so I think there's something about this teaching each other and about the laughter and the humor that keeps us going. That is what.
Wow. I like that. Just to be quick, because I know we're running out of time here. There's a lot of words and concepts we don't understand, so I have to say them in English so that you understand. One is sacrifice. We don't have the word for sacrifice, but also just for the last person on is that to me is what I understand is that every moment is innocent. There will never be a time like right now. We can continue without guilt and sin and blame and all that, which doesn't exist. Really, those are concepts. And when I think about how we in this Western world has continued to adhere to our needs, that's changing. The earth, we have to change our way of living with the earth. We have to adapt our lives to her rather than adapting the earth to meet our needs. And it's just one or the other, right? Peace with earth or peace on the earth. So it's a concept I have to use, unfortunately, to point across that I don't agree with in here, but I have to say that because there's no other feeling for it. And the language I'm speaking to you now, it kind of lacks exalted expression. Yippee, yahoo, hooray is not expression. It's much more than that.
Greg, can I say a 30-second thing before you close?
Please do.
Andrew, what you said, one person can really, we can get paralyzed with just trying to decrease our footprint. There are a number of calculators around on the internet that help you calculate how much carbon emissions you are responsible for. But you could work very hard and decrease your footprint. Average American footprint is 30 tons of carbon dioxide every year. You can work hard and bring it down to 15, and you can spend all your energy into that. But the problem our planet, our Mother Earth is facing, if you just think climate, which I don't want to, but for number's sake, it's a 60 billion ton problem. We have to look at our footprint so we feel an alignment with our values, but we'd rather gather 60,000 people to look at that problem together. And yes, that does start with storytelling, right? Grieving together, joy together, dancing together, creating communities that can stare at this 60 billion ton problem together, because 30 to 20 tons is not going to do anything. Okay.
All right, it's time. And I just want to, I want to thank all of you for sharing in this time and allowing wisdom to come up for all of us to take part in. And it's been a nourishing conversation. It's been a loving conversation. It's been a joyful one. And to be able to bring that to a difficult, what Tiokasin called a crash, to the crash. But for us to feel into the love that is going to potentially shift that and bring life back where we have taken life. So that I deeply appreciate you all being here. I thank you for being here. And I want to thank Peace for taking care of all of us and organizing this. Thank you so much, as always. And thank you all for coming. And I just want to do a quick shout out to the Center for Earth Ethics at Union, because they have carried these kinds of conversations forward with communities for a while now. So it's important to know that they're also doing this work all the time. But thank you all for being here, and thank you for taking part. It's been a joy for me, and I'm going to carry it in my heart. Good night, everyone.